Long before Spain became synonymous with conquistadors and global empire, the Iberian Peninsula was a tapestry of diverse peoples and cultures. The Iberians, who gave their name to the peninsula, dominated the Mediterranean coastal regions from the 6th century BC onwards. These sophisticated peoples developed extensive trade networks with Phoenicians and Greeks, establishing cities like Sagunto and adopting advanced metallurgy and pottery techniques. Their society was hierarchical, with powerful warrior elites ruling from hilltop settlements called oppida. In the rugged northern mountains lived the Vascones, ancestors of today's Basques, speaking a language so ancient and unique that modern Basque remains unrelated to any other known language family on Earth. These hardy mountain peoples would prove remarkably resistant to outside influence throughout history. Meanwhile, Celtic tribes migrated across the Pyrenees, bringing ironworking technology and mixing with native populations to create the Celt-Iberians, who dominated the northern and western regions of the peninsula. The strategic location of Iberia, controlling access between the Atlantic and Mediterranean, made it irresistible to ancient Mediterranean powers. Phoenicians established trading posts along the southern coast, followed by Greek colonies in the east. Most significantly, Carthage colonized extensive territories, making Iberia a crucial source of silver, soldiers, and strategic bases. When Rome clashed with Carthage in the Punic Wars, Iberia became a major theater of conflict. In the 6th century BC, diverse Iberian tribes inhabited the peninsula, living in scattered settlements and practicing their ancient customs. In the northern highlands, the fierce Vascones maintained their independence from their mountain strongholds. The Celt-Iberians emerged as a distinct culture, known for their superior ironworking and warrior traditions. Carthaginian influence grew along the coast, establishing trading posts and harbors. Roman conquest began in 206 BC during the Second Punic War, but subduing the fierce tribal peoples took over 2 centuries of brutal warfare. The final conquest wasn't completed until 19 BC, under Emperor Augustus. Rome didn't merely conquer, it transformed. Latin replaced local languages, Roman law governed society, and magnificent cities arose, connected by superb roads and engineering marvels. Christianity took root, establishing monasteries and bishoprics that would define Spanish spirituality for millennia. When Germanic tribes overran the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, Hispania had been so thoroughly Romanized that Latin culture, law, language, and religion survived every subsequent conquest. The very name Hispania derives from the Roman Hispania, testament to this profound and lasting transformation. As the Western Roman Empire crumbled under barbarian pressure, multiple Germanic tribes crossed the Pyrenees into Hispania in the fateful autumn of 409 AD. The Vandals carved out territories in the south, giving their name to Andalusia, before moving on to establish a kingdom in North Africa. The Alans, a nomadic people from the Eurasian steppes, settled across central Spain and Portugal. The Suebi claimed the northwestern regions. But it was the Visigoths who would ultimately unite the peninsula under Germanic rule. Initially foederati, allied troops serving Rome, the Visigoths gradually asserted independence from their imperial paymasters. Under kings like Euric, who murdered his way to power in typical Germanic fashion, they systematically dismantled the last vestiges of Roman authority. By 472 AD, Western Roman rule in Hispania was finished forever. The Visigothic kingdom now stretched from Poitiers in southern France to the Atlantic coast of Portugal, encompassing nearly the entire peninsula. Despite their military dominance, the Visigoths faced a fundamental demographic challenge. Perhaps 200,000 Germanic warriors and their families now ruled over 6 million Hispano-Romans. This massive imbalance meant Visigothic rule was more accurately described as a Germanic military elite governing a thoroughly Romanized population. For generations, the two peoples remained strictly segregated. Different legal codes, forbidden intermarriage under penalty of death, and bitter religious division between Arian Christian Visigoths and Catholic Hispano-Romans. Everything changed in 589 AD when King Recared dramatically converted the entire Visigothic kingdom to Catholicism. This religious unification began a remarkable process of cultural fusion. The 654 AD Visigothic legal code applied equally to all inhabitants, regardless of ethnic origin. Intermarriage became common, and a unified Hispanic identity gradually emerged from the merger of Germanic and Roman traditions. Yet political stability remained elusive in Visigothic Spain. Kings were elected by noble assemblies, leading to frequent succession disputes, civil wars, and royal assassinations. The Byzantines exploited one such conflict to establish a foothold in southeastern Spain from 552 to 624 AD, briefly resurrecting Roman rule. Internal divisions and political chaos would prove fatal when Islamic armies appeared across the strait in the early 8th century, finding a kingdom weakened by civil war and ripe for conquest. In the spring of 711 AD, a Berber commander named Tariq ibn Ziyad led approximately 7,000 Muslim warriors across the narrow strait separating Africa from Europe. The Visigothic kingdom they encountered was in chaos. King Witiza had died the previous year, and two rival claimants, Roderick and Aquila, were locked in civil war for the throne. This internal strife proved catastrophic when Christian and Muslim armies clashed at the Battle of Guadalete. King Roderick died in the fighting, Visigothic resistance collapsed, and within 7 years the Umayyad Caliphate controlled virtually the entire Iberian Peninsula. The speed of Islamic conquest reflected not just superior military organization, but also the appeal of Muslim rule to many inhabitants. Unlike the Germanic Visigoths, Muslims practiced structured religious tolerance based on Quranic principles. Christians and Jews became dhimmi, protected people, who could maintain their faiths while accepting second-class status and paying the jizya tax. Many Visigothic nobles submitted peacefully to retain their lands and privileges, while common people often welcomed rulers who promised lower taxes and greater religious freedom than their Germanic predecessors. Al-Andalus, as Muslim Spain became known, developed into a remarkably diverse society. Christian Mozarabs maintained their religion while adopting Arabic culture and language. Many Iberians converted to Islam, becoming muladies, often achieving positions of significant influence despite their non-Arab origins. Arabic became the language of administration, science, and high culture, while Latin dialects persisted among common people, gradually evolving into the Romance languages we know today as Spanish, Portuguese, and Catalan. In 756 AD, Prince Abd al-Rahman I, the last surviving heir of the Umayyad dynasty, fled Damascus following the massacre of his family. His journey would forever change the face of medieval Europe. Crossing vast distances, he established an independent emirate in Córdoba, laying the foundation for what would become one of the most sophisticated civilizations of the medieval world. Under Umayyad rule, Córdoba grew to rival Baghdad and Constantinople. The city became a beacon of learning, culture, and architectural innovation. The Great Mosque of Córdoba, with its forest of distinctive horseshoe arches, stood as a masterpiece of Islamic architecture in the West. Al-Andalus became a crucial bridge between East and West. Here, scholars preserved and advanced knowledge in mathematics, medicine, philosophy, and technology. This remarkable synthesis of Islamic, Jewish, and Christian cultures would later help spark the European Renaissance, leaving an indelible mark on world history. When Abd al-Rahman III proclaimed himself caliph in 929 AD, he elevated Al-Andalus to unprecedented heights of power and prestige, creating a golden age that would shine for centuries to come. While Muslim armies swept across Iberia with seemingly unstoppable momentum, a small band of Christian nobles and local warriors retreated to the mountainous region of Asturias in the far north. Here, in approximately 718 to 722 AD, a Visigothic nobleman named Pelayo achieved what seemed impossible: the first Christian military victory over Muslim forces. At the Battle of Covadonga, Pelayo's men ambushed a much larger Islamic army in a narrow mountain pass, utterly destroying it and proving that the invaders were not invincible. This victory, though small in scale, carried enormous psychological significance. Pelayo proclaimed himself king of an independent Christian realm, claiming to be the legitimate heir of the Visigothic kingdom and rightful ruler of all Hispania. The kingdom of Asturias, though poor and isolated compared to the sophisticated cities of Al-Andalus, represented continuity with pre-Islamic Christian traditions and became a beacon of hope for Christians throughout the peninsula. Asturian kings like Alfonso I, the Catholic, and Alfonso II, the Chaste, gradually expanded their territory, aided by the rugged terrain that favored guerrilla warfare over the organized armies of Al-Andalus. The discovery of the supposed tomb of St. James the Apostle at Santiago de Compostela around 830 AD provided a powerful religious focus for Christian resistance. Santiago became not only a pilgrimage destination, rivaling Rome and Jerusalem, but also a symbol of divine favor for the Christian cause. The political landscape grew increasingly complex as new Christian kingdoms emerged. When the Asturian capital moved to Leon around 910 AD, the Kingdom of Leon became the premier Christian power. Meanwhile, the County of Castile developed on the eastern frontier, its name meaning Land of Castles, due to its heavy fortifications against Muslim raids. In the Pyrenees, the Kingdom of Pamplona, later Navarre, emerged among the Basques, while Frankish influence created the counties of Aragon and Barcelona in the northeast. The fragmentation of the Umayyad Caliphate after 1009 AD into competing Taifa kingdoms provided unprecedented opportunities for Christian expansion. Rather than immediate conquest, however, Christian rulers often preferred extracting tribute payments called parias from Muslim kingdoms, a lucrative protection racket that funded Christian armies while keeping Muslim rivals divided and weak. This system allowed kingdoms like Leon Castile to grow rich and powerful, while Al-Andalus remained politically fragmented. The decisive turning point came in 1085 when Alfonso VI of Leon Castile captured Toledo, the ancient Visigothic capital. This conquest sent shockwaves throughout the Islamic world and marked the first major Christian breakthrough into the heartland of Al-Andalus. The fall of Toledo demonstrated that the Reconquista was no longer merely a defensive struggle in the northern mountains, but an aggressive campaign that threatened the very existence of Muslim Spain. The fall of Toledo in 1085 terrified the Taifa rulers of Al-Andalus, who faced a stark choice: submit to Christian conquest or seek help from fellow Muslims across the strait. Desperate for salvation, they appealed to the Almoravids, a fundamentalist Berber movement that had conquered Morocco through strict Islamic reform and military discipline. These desert warriors, led by Yusuf ibn Tashfin, crossed into Iberia and inflicted devastating defeats on Christian forces at Sagrajas in 1086 and Eucles in 1108, killing Alfonso VI's son and heir in the latter battle. However, the Almoravids' success came at a steep price for Al-Andalus. Finding the Taifa rulers weak and corrupt, they systematically deposed them by 1090, imposing direct Moroccan rule over Islamic Spain. Their harsh, puritanical interpretation of Islam contrasted sharply with the relatively tolerant cosmopolitan culture of the Taifas, alienating both Muslim and non-Muslim populations. Christians and Jews faced increased persecution, while Andalusi Muslims chafed under foreign Berber domination. The Reconquista had now become intertwined with the broader crusading movement sweeping through Europe. Pope Urban II's call for holy war to reclaim Jerusalem in 1095 inspired warriors across Christendom, and many viewed the struggle in Iberia as equally sacred. French nobles like Raymond of Burgundy married into Spanish royal families, bringing international support and expertise to Christian armies. The fall of Jerusalem to the First Crusade in 1099 provided a powerful model for Spanish Christians, who began viewing their own struggle as a holy war to liberate their homeland from infidel occupation. The Almoravids themselves eventually succumbed to an even more fundamentalist movement. The Almohads, who conquered Morocco and Al-Andalus by 1173. These new rulers implemented even harsher policies toward Christians and Jews, forcing many to choose between conversion, emigration to Christian territories, or death. The Almohad persecution backfired spectacularly, creating a refugee population in Christian Spain with intimate knowledge of Al-Andalus and strong motivation for revenge. The climax of this confrontation came in 1212 at the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa. Pope Innocent III declared a formal crusade, uniting the Christian kingdoms of Castile, Leon, Aragon, and Navarre with crusaders from across Europe. Despite being outnumbered 3-1, the Christian coalition achieved a crushing victory that annihilated Almohad military power and prestige. Within 2 decades, Almohad rule had collapsed entirely across both Morocco and Al-Andalus. Ferdinand III of Castile-Leon, known as the Saint, capitalized ruthlessly on this chaos. His armies conquered Córdoba in 1236 and Seville in 1248, capturing the 2 greatest cities of Islamic Spain. The psychological impact was enormous. Córdoba had been the seat of the Umayyad Caliphate, while Seville was Al-Andalus's commercial heart. By mid-century, only the Emirate of Granada remained of Muslim Spain, surviving as a tributary state protected by the Sierra Nevada mountains and skillful diplomacy with its Christian overlords. With the Reconquista apparently nearing completion, the Christian kingdoms of Spain entered a new phase characterized by internal consolidation, political evolution, and the emergence of a distinctly Spanish identity. The Emirate of Granada, the last Muslim stronghold, survived for over 2.5 centuries through a combination of military skill, diplomatic cunning, and geographical advantage. Nestled behind the formidable Sierra Nevada mountain range, Granada developed into a remarkable fortress state that paid tribute to Castile while maintaining its independence and Islamic character. The Nasrid dynasty that ruled Granada from 1238 to 1492 created one of history's most beautiful architectural achievements in the Alhambra palace complex. This stunning example of Islamic art represented not decline, but rather a final flowering of Andalusi culture. Granada's rulers skillfully played Christian kingdoms against each other, occasionally receiving military support from Morocco's Marinid dynasty when tributary relationships broke down. The kingdom's survival demonstrated that the Reconquista was not an inevitable steamroller, but a complex political and military struggle with uncertain outcomes. The 14th and 15th centuries brought unprecedented challenges that tested all Spanish kingdoms. The Black Death arrived in 1349, killing perhaps half the population and fundamentally altering Spanish society. Alfonso XI of Castile became one of its most prominent victims, dying while besieging Granada, just as final victory seemed within reach. The demographic catastrophe forced Spanish rulers to abandon aggressive expansion and focus on rebuilding their devastated realms. Political instability plagued the era as noble factions fought for control of weakened monarchies. Castile endured a brutal civil war between Peter the Cruel and Henry of Trastamara, which drew in foreign powers including England and France as part of the broader 100 Years' War. Succession disputes erupted regularly in Aragon, while Portugal faced repeated Castilian attempts at annexation, successfully resisting with English support at battles like Aljubarrota in 1385. Despite these setbacks, Spanish society was undergoing profound transformation. The Castilian language was becoming standardized through works like the legal code of Alfonso X, the Wise, and emerging as the dominant tongue of the peninsula. Trade networks expanded, connecting Spanish ports with northern European and Mediterranean markets. Most significantly, Spain began its first tentative steps toward overseas expansion with the conquest of the Canary Islands beginning in 1402, providing valuable experience in overseas colonization. The decisive moment for Spanish unification came with the marriage of Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon in 1469. This union, while maintaining technically separate kingdoms, created a formidable partnership capable of completing the Reconquista. Their Catholic monarchs combined Castile's population and resources with Aragon's Mediterranean experience and naval power. After consolidating their authority against noble opposition, they launched the final assault on Granada in 1482. 10 years of grueling siege warfare culminated on January 2, 1492, when the last Muslim ruler, Boabdil, surrendered the keys of Granada to Isabella and Ferdinand, ending nearly 8 centuries of Islamic rule in Iberia and giving birth to unified Spain. The year 1492 marked not just the completion of the Reconquista, but Spain's explosive emergence as the world's first global superpower. Christopher Columbus's voyage, sponsored by Isabella and Ferdinand, despite the enormous cost of the Granada War, opened the Americas to European exploration and Spanish conquest. Within a generation, Spanish conquistadors had achieved seemingly impossible victories over the great American empires. Hernán Cortés conquering the Aztec Empire with just 600 men, and Francisco Pizarro toppling the Inca with even fewer. The The wealth that poured into Spain from American silver mines, particularly Potosi in Bolivia, was unprecedented in human history. Seville became Europe's wealthiest city as treasure fleets arrived annually, protected by elaborate convoy systems. This influx of precious metals financed Spanish ambitions across the globe and fundamentally altered the European economy, though it also triggered inflation that would eventually undermine Spanish competitiveness. The Habsburg dynasty, beginning with Charles V in 1516, elevated Spain to the pinnacle of European power. Charles inherited an incredible collection of territories, not only Spain and its American empire, but also the Netherlands, much of Italy, parts of Germany, and was elected Holy Roman Emperor. His son Philip II expanded this inheritance even further, temporarily adding Portugal and its Asian and African empire in 1580, creating a truly global dominion where the sun never set. This was Spain's golden age in every sense: military, economic, cultural, and spiritual. Spanish literature flourished with figures like Miguel de Cervantes, whose Don Quixote became the world's first modern novel. Artists like Diego Velázquez and El Greco created masterpieces that defined European painting. Spanish became a global language of culture, diplomacy, and trade, while Catholicism spread across continents through Spanish missionary efforts led by orders like the Jesuits and Franciscans. Spanish military power seemed invincible. The tercios, professional infantry formations combining pikes, swords, and firearms, dominated European battlefields for over a century. Spanish fleets controlled the Mediterranean, Atlantic, and Pacific, connecting global trade networks from Manila to Seville. The Spanish Inquisition, though often exaggerated in later Protestant propaganda, helped create religious unity within Spain, while Spanish universities like Salamanca led European intellectual life. However, managing such a vast empire proved extraordinarily expensive and complex. Philip II's wars against Protestant England and the rebellious Netherlands drained the treasury despite American silver. The devastating defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588 marked the beginning of Spanish naval decline and opened the seas to English and Dutch competition. Constant European warfare, the enormous cost of defending global trade routes, and the challenges of governing territories stretching from Peru to the Philippines gradually exhausted Spanish resources. By 1700, when the last Habsburg king Charles II died without an heir, Spain remained territorially vast but was financially exhausted and militarily overstretched. The War of Spanish Succession would determine not only who would rule Spain, but whether the world's first global empire could survive intact into a new century dominated by rising powers like France and England. The War of Spanish Succession, 1701 to 1714, brought the Bourbon dynasty to Spain, but at an enormous cost to the empire. Philip V, grandson of Francis Louis XIV, secured the Spanish throne but was forced to cede the Spanish Netherlands, most Italian territories, Gibraltar and Minorca to Austria and Britain. The once invincible Spanish Empire was now clearly subordinate to other European powers, its global supremacy definitively broken. The 18th century witnessed determined attempts at recovery under enlightened Bourbon monarchs, particularly Charles III, 1759 to 1788. These rulers implemented sweeping reforms, modernizing the administration, promoting economic development, founding new industries, strengthening the military, and establishing new universities. The Bourbon reforms extended to America, creating new viceroyalties and intendancies to improve colonial administration and defense. However, these very reforms often sparked resentment among colonial elites who had grown accustomed to autonomy under the more relaxed Habsburg system. Spain's involvement in European power politics continued to drain resources and expose the empire to attack. The disastrous alliance with revolutionary and Napoleonic France culminated in the Battle of Trafalgar, 1805, where Admiral Nelson's fleet destroyed the combined French and Spanish navies, permanently ending Spanish naval supremacy. Spain had become a junior partner in European affairs, its destiny increasingly determined by foreign powers rather than its own choices. Napoleon's invasion of Spain in 1808 triggered a catastrophic chain reaction that destroyed the Spanish Empire. The Peninsular War, 1808 to 1814, devastated the homeland as Spanish guerrillas, supported by British forces under Wellington, fought a brutal war of independence against French occupation. Meanwhile, the collapse of royal authority in Madrid provided the opportunity Spanish Americans had long awaited for independence. Across Spanish America, juntas formed claiming to rule in the name of the deposed Ferdinand VII, but quickly evolved into independence movements. Brilliant leaders like Simón Bolívar in the north and José de San Martín in the south orchestrated liberation campaigns that by 1825 had freed virtually all of mainland Spanish America. Spain's empire, built over 3 centuries of conquest and colonization, collapsed in less than 2 decades of revolution and war. The 19th century brought Spain little respite from crisis. The country endured 3 savage civil wars between liberals and conservatives, the Carlist Wars, 1833 to 1876, each leaving deep scars in Spanish society. Political instability became chronic. Pronunciamientos, military coups, occurred regularly. Constitutional governments were overthrown, and regional separatist movements emerged in Catalonia and the Basque provinces. Economic stagnation left Spain increasingly behind industrializing nations like Britain, France, and Germany. Brief periods of stability, such as the Liberal Triennium, 1820 to 1823, or the Restoration Monarchy after 1875, were repeatedly interrupted by coups, revolutions, and social unrest. The final humiliation came in 1898 with the Spanish-American War, where Spain's crushing defeat by the United States cost it Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines, the last significant remnants of its once global empire. The disaster of 1898 forced Spain to confront its reduced status as a minor European power and begin the painful process of national regeneration. The loss of the final overseas empire in 1898 sparked a profound national crisis of identity and purpose, known as the Generation of 1898. Intellectuals like Miguel de Unamuno, Pío Baroja, and Antonio Machado questioned fundamental assumptions about Spanish identity, while political movements emerged demanding regeneration, modernization, and democratic reform. The early 20th century saw growing tensions between traditional Catholic, rural Spain, and modernizing secular forces concentrated in cities like Barcelona and Madrid. Spain's neutrality during World War I brought temporary economic prosperity as the country supplied both sides, but also highlighted its internal divisions and international isolation. The monarchy of Alfonso XIII struggled with military disasters in the Rif War in Morocco, severe economic problems, labor unrest, and the rise of anarchist and socialist movements. The king's support for General Primo de Rivera's military dictatorship, 1923 to 1930, fatally compromised the monarchy's legitimacy. Municipal elections in April 1931 triggered a Republican landslide that forced Alfonso XIII to flee the country without formally abdicating. The Second Spanish Republic, 1931 to 1939, attempted ambitious reforms: land redistribution to address rural poverty, secular education to reduce church influence, regional autonomy for Catalonia and the Basque provinces, and military reforms to establish civilian control. However, these changes provoked fierce resistance from conservatives, landowners, the military establishment, and the Catholic Church. Spain became increasingly polarized between left and right, with violence escalating after the Popular Front's narrow electoral victory in February 1936. On July 17, 1936, General Francisco Franco led a military uprising against the democratically elected government, expecting a quick victory. Instead, Spain plunged into a devastating civil war that became an international proxy conflict, with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy supporting Franco, while the Soviet Union aided the Republic with arms and advisors. The Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939, was both a rehearsal for World War II and a uniquely Spanish tragedy. Cities like Guernica were bombed for the first time in history, inspiring Picasso's famous painting. International volunteers in the international brigades fought alongside Spanish Republicans, while German and Italian volunteers provided crucial support to Franco's nationalists. The war's outcome was never really in doubt once Franco received massive foreign military aid, while the Republic faced an international arms embargo. Franco's victory in April 1939 established a repressive dictatorship that would last until his death in November 1975. Despite remaining neutral in World War II, though providing unofficial support to Germany, Franco's regime faced international isolation for decades. Economic development came slowly, accelerating dramatically in the 1960s with tourism, foreign investment, and worker remittances from emigrants to Northern Europe. But political freedom remained completely absent. The transition to democracy after Franco's death proved remarkably peaceful and successful. King Juan Carlos, Franco's chosen successor, surprised everyone by supporting democratic reform under Prime Minister Adolfo Suárez. The 1978 Constitution established a federal system, recognizing significant regional autonomy while maintaining national unity. Spain weathered an attempted military coup in 1981, joined NATO in 1982, and entered the European Union in 1986, fully integrating into Western democratic institutions. Despite ongoing challenges, the 2008 financial crisis, high unemployment, corruption scandals, and separatist movements in Catalonia and the Basque Country, Spain today stands as a stable parliamentary democracy and prosperous member of the European Union. From the isolated dictatorship of just decades ago to a modern European nation hosting global events like the 1992 Olympics and wielding cultural influence through its language and arts, Spain's transformation represents one of the most successful democratic transitions in modern history.